Morning and welcome back to the Closers Inner Circle podcast with Denise Griffiths and Ben Gay III. And today our topic is not every no is a dead deal. And we'll be talking about the 4 types of rejection that every master closer knows about. Now, Ben did mention in the green room that he's got some questions from people. So I'm going to tell you what those 4 objections are, or those 4 types of rejection. We may not make it all the way through today. So if we don't, we'll make it up next week. But the 4 types of no, one of them is not now, not this version, not this price, not ever. And each one demands a completely different response. If you confuse them, you'll walk away from deals that were never actually closed and may never be closed. The second one is rejection as intelligence, not a verdict. Amateurs treat every lost sale as a permanent door slam. That's just not the truth. Closers treat it as if it's a signal telling them exactly what still needs to change before the next attempt. And we're going to talk a bit about this because this is what Ben and I were talking about in the green room, the infiltration parallel. A failed entry doesn't mean that the target is permanently inaccessible. It means that this approach at this time just wasn't right. The professional salesperson regroups, adjusts, and tries again. Same instinct, different battlefield. And then the reversal window. Did you know this? A significant share of no decisions flip within 6 to 12 months once circumstances shift. Money gets better. Maybe the need is greater. You just don't know. But a no is not, as a rule, permanent if you know what you're doing. And honestly, the only closers who benefit are the ones who, and this is important, I'm going to say it again, the only closers who benefit are the ones who stayed in the relationship professionally the whole time. And let me tell you about our sponsor. Our sponsor today is brought to you Our episode today is brought to you by Randy Chaffee, and he is someone who knows a thing or two about staying in the game after a no. Randy represents manufacturers and serves customers across the post-frame metal building and residential roof industries where deals rarely close on the first conversation. And he's also the author of the #1 Amazon bestseller, Asphalt and Algorithms, and he built his business on trust, visibility, and authentic connection. We talk a lot about that in sales. The same qualities that Ben and I are talking about today when it comes to turning a no or a not yet into a yes. So if you're in the building or roofing space and want to work with someone who plays the long game right, look up Randy Chaffee on LinkedIn and go from there. Ben, good morning. How are you?
I'm fine, and I hope you are. For our listeners, Denise had a bad spill and busted up her shoulder and ribs, etc. And so welcome back. I'm thrilled you're here. As to
Me too.
Randy, as to,
And I think I told you yesterday that when the PT, my occupational therapist, was here yesterday, she said, you have a complex injury. And I said, what's a complex injury? She said, well, it was pretty bad. You have 2 actual injuries, and one of them was really bad. And I told you earlier, I'm so glad I didn't know that in the beginning because my whining would have been epic. I would have just whined and cried and yelled. But since I know it now and I'm feeling better, I'm like, oh, that's interesting.
and she told you wouldn't be doing backflips or gymnastics, but
Yeah.
in the future, but you didn't have any plans anyway, did you?
No, she said you'll probably never have full range of motion. I said, what does that mean? She said, well, you probably won't be able to raise your arm all the way up. I said, so I won't be doing cartwheels? She said, no. I said, okay. That's all I needed to know.
Well, welcome back. We were worried about you. As
Thank
to Randy, you just mentioned if you're in the building business or whatever, let me encourage our listeners that it's also beyond that. Randy's book, Asphalt and Algorithms, what he means by that is he, like most of us, and he still does a lot of it, were raised hoofing it from one customer to another, driving there, etc. And now we're in a new age where, in addition to that, we have the algorithms and the this and that and 87 different ways of looking at a prospect, which is good news. Sometimes it's too much news, in my opinion, but that's what he covers. So I'd say 90% of his book, although he wrote it for that industry, working trade shows and so on, at which he is a master. Um, Talk about a sales infiltrator. He doesn't go to the trade shows to make a sale in his booth. He goes to trade shows and conventions and so on to follow up on the appointments he's already set. He does a lot of his work over the phone and by computer, etc., before the show. So the show is interesting. That's why the people got together. But to him, it's just another tool to bring qualified prospects in front of him. And he's really good. Also, besides the book Asphalt and Algorithms, he is the author of a book that I believe is either at the printer or about to be at the printer, The Closers Part 7. So he's officially joined the Closers family along with Denise, The Closers Part 4, and all the other books in the series. And I'm really looking forward to adding that to the list. I grew up with my father in the food brokerage business, then became a manufacturer's rep with a different firm. I've spent a lot of time in trade shows and conventions and so on, and I wish I had met Randy and read his first book, and then now The Closers Part 7 first, because I was a booth hound. I wandered around, talked to people, but mainly my attitude was I sit in the booth, I hand out brochures, I get their business cards, and maybe we'll do business later. Never wrote a whole lot of business at a trade show. Now knowing Randy, which for me is about 40, 50 years late, I know what I should have been doing. But most people in those trade shows are like the old me. Except now they have a distraction. They sit in their booth with a brochure spread out on the table, looking at their cell phones or their laptops, and they just
Yeah. Or they
move.
have a big display screen on top of where you can just watch it. It's
Yeah,
very passive.
exactly. So they look more sophisticated, but they're doing what I did 45 years ago. They're just sitting there waiting for lightning to strike and hoping the show will be over any minute so they can get back to real business. Well, Randy teaches you in Asphalt and Algorithms, and will soon teach you in The Closers Part 7 that those shows can be your entire business. I mean, you can write enough business at one of those shows, set up enough business at one of those shows where you almost don't have time for anything else. So I would encourage you to pick up Asphalt and Algorithms at Amazon or wherever, and then look for The Closers Part 7 because it's about to come out also. Oh, I was just looking at Asphalt and Algorithms. Guess who wrote the foreword for that book and is featured prominently on the front cover?
Is it somebody we both know and love?
I think so. It says Ben Gay the
The
Third.
third. Yeah, I have the book as well.
So
And you're writing the foreword for mine, and you're writing the foreword for our friend Cynthia Kay.
all right.
Yeah, I mean, she sent me her PDF, and I looked at that and I went, I want to be able to write like that. But she said,
Yeah.
I got it. This is, when couldn't move, and I was reading that document, and I was so whiny. So I told her, I said, whatever I say, don't pay any attention to me. I'm whiny. She said, okay. But it's great. It's going to be a great addition to the closers.
Well, I'm looking forward to the final uh, version, and excited about adding that to the closer series also. A long time ago, when I got the rights and rewrote the closers, it wasn't part 1; it was just the closers. Never crossed my mind that we'd be now looking at the closers part 10 pretty quick, and all the millions of lives those books have touched. It's really been incredible. So, uh, welcoming Randy's been a friend so long, I feel awkward saying welcome to the family or welcome to the team, but welcome to having a closer's book with your name on the cover is really what I'm saying. Back
Right.
to the sales infiltration and the 4 types of rejection, etc. And you put the outline together, for which I appreciate it. It brought me the four types, no, not now, not this version, not at this price, not ever. One of my early mentors, Larry Wilson of the Wilson Learning Corporation, and Wade Cannon, who at that time was also with the Wilson Learning Corporation. They were both mentors of mine because I was in my early 20s when I met them and started rising up through the sales ranks. We're sitting at a table one day, probably lunch or dinner, and working on phrases and things that would help salespeople. And one of them we came up with, which I remember when I saw your outline today, was when somebody puts up an objection, you say to yourself, he's asking me a question. What is the question he's asking, or she? And so I thought that was really clever, and it caught on, and it's like feel, felt, found. I know how you feel. Others have felt the same way. That came from one of our lunch or dinner sessions. Same people, Larry Wilson, Wade Cannon, and me. So I fell in love with it. You know, it's like reading your own press release. So not long after that, before we really started promoting it, I was working with a guy trying to sell him something, and he said no in so many words. And I said, "You're asking me a question. What is the question you're asking me?" And I'm smiling inwardly since I'd helped create the phrase. And he said, "There's no question. I don't like your product, your pricing, or anything else. We're done." So later that day, I called Larry and Wade and got them on the phone. They were in the same office. And I said, "Let me tell you, I've run into the first objection to our phrase, he's asking me a question." And they both, in so many words, said, "We didn't tell you to tell him that. You're just supposed to know that." I said, "Oh, okay. I'll adjust my notes." So sometime, and you mentioned a moment ago that a, a no is not a permanent door slam. And then later you said after 6 to 12 months, circumstances can shift. They can even shift during the conversation.
I've
Uh,
had that happen multiple
yeah,
times.
yeah.
I had this one woman, I just talked with her yesterday. She was the very first person that I was coaching to become a podcaster. And the first thing she said, well, I don't want to do this. I'm calling you because a mutual friend of ours suggested that she call me, but she was not ready. She didn't want to do it. And she said, I just don't see why I need to do something like this. I said, not a problem. Thank you for chatting with me. And then 2 minutes later, she goes, okay, I'm ready. I said, ready for what? She said, I'm ready to work with you. I went, what? Well, how did that happen? And
Hello, hello.
yeah, it was the weirdest thing, but we're still friends. She called me yesterday because she needed some advice on something, and we had a terrific conversation. And I'm really glad we got to work together. But her first instinct was no, hell no.
Well, a
But she
lot of
changed
times
it
that's their
instantly.
first instinct anyway.
I know. I know.
Someone's trying to sell me something. No, that's the quickest knee-jerk reaction they can have, followed by, I got to think about it. I have to talk to my brother-in-law, so on. So a lot of them are just preconditioned resistance. And it's important you sort of skate over that and almost pretend like you didn't hear it. I have a difficult time hearing no. Uh, it doesn't register.
And it's my favorite word.
Well, I use it also frequently, but I'm talking about as a salesperson. Uh,
Right.
no almost isn't in uh, my vocabulary for understanding. I glide on over it. And it dawned on me while I was talking about looking at your note about in 6 to 12 months, things can change. As you know, I'm proud of bragging about my closing ratio, 86%. Of major sales, significant sales, not taking a book order. And but I always acknowledge that means 14% said no, and of the roughly 100,000 presentations face-to-face or on the phone or whatever that I've given, that means with about 100,000 somebody figured out one day based on my averages, that means that 14,000 people have listened to the marvelous Ben Gay presentation of whatever the product or service was and said no. So I use that as an example for overcoming rejection. 14,000 people who said, no, I don't want your product. What you said didn't register with me. Goodbye. And so you need to toughen up for rejection. They come. But reading your thing today, about 6 to 12 months later, those 14,000 people that said no, that doesn't mean no forever. Many of them bought. I have no idea what the percentage is, but many of them bought later. Many of them I'm still doing business with today. So no doesn't mean no anyway, unless you burn your bridges. If you say or do something stupid, you can, or get offended, you can easily move over into the category of no means don't ever call me again, stay away from me, etc. But part of sales infiltration is gliding past those things. I don't hear no. We're going to be friends whether you like it or not. Whether you buy or not doesn't affect our long-term relationship, etc. Sales infiltration. As soon as I start talking to you, if you're with another company and we're going to perhaps do business together, I start talking about we. Now, what's the problem we're facing exactly? Do you have any ideas how we should solve that? And they think nothing of it, but what I've just done is take a half step into becoming a part of their organization. I'm part of a team. I've said this many times before to your listeners, but it's worth repeating. Most sales situations are team A, the salesperson, against team B, the prospect. Your job as a sales infiltrator is to form team C that you're both on. You each own 50% of it, and mutually you've agreed what the problem is, that it needs solving, and how to solve it. And so you get in. Do you remember that game? I can remember it clearly because I grew up in a neighborhood full of girls. Uh, may I take 2 steps forward? And I picture the girl sitting on the front steps saying yes or no or whatever. And you had to get permission to take a step forward or 2 steps forward. I forget exactly how the game went, but it was may I was what it was called, and that was part of it. Oh, I always won at may I, and I don't think most of them ever don't know today how I did it. And the way I did it was I stood with my arms crossed with 1 foot forward. And anytime there was anything to talk about or debate or whatever, I would move let's say my left foot up even with my right foot. So I just advanced a half a step or a full step toward him, and it didn't even look like part of the game. It was just a normal body movement. And then I would get back in that same position, put one out in front of the other, and wait for the next opportunity to discuss something or object to something or what have you. In each case, I would get closer. So I didn't have to have her give me permission in the may I game to advance on her and tap her on the shoulder. I was almost on top of her before she realized that I was there.
And it's body language. You have to pay attention to body language.
I remember them saying, how'd you win? I only told you yes twice. I don't know. Your parents laid out the sidewalk. It's not me. But that's what it was body language, half steps. And although I was years away from creating the term, it was sales infiltration, body infiltration. And I do a version of that when I'm selling someone. You say no, or I don't like it, or whatever. That's interesting. but it's not going to affect me until we both decide the answer today is really no. And you said in here the infiltration panel failed entry doesn't mean the target is permanently inaccessible. It means this approach at this time. Absolutely right. Um, the I never. There are people I dislike so much I wouldn't call on them again. I just don't want to be around them. But if we have a normal, quote unquote, relationship, no sale, no relationship is ever close to me. And that goes back many, many years. One of my dear friends, Nolan Bush, attended a seminar I did almost 60 years ago. And we still do business today. There have been a couple of year gaps in there where we just didn't have anything of interest to either one of us. But we're doing business again now and have been off and on for 60 years. And must have been some no's in there somewhere. Just had to have been. But I don't hear them. I just keep moving forward, sticking one foot out, crossing my arms, and pulling myself up straight. And they're another 18 inches closer to the goal. And that goal might be a month long. It might be a few years long, but it doesn't make any difference. I have very few enemies that I know of, very few people who just really dislike me and don't want to do business with me. At worst, we just don't do business. There's 8 billion people on the planet, and I don't do business with 99.999% of them. A few more aren't going to make any difference. So I don't burn bridges. I assume the sale. I become we with them. And I know if not now, probably you'll come back. I was asked, you alluded to it earlier, I was asked earlier this week if we ever gave examples of specific examples of using sales infiltration in a practical place, names, dates, places, and so on. So I jotted down a couple. One was NASA, the National Aeronautics Space Administration. I was attitude coach for the crews, land-based crews, the launch crews, and the astronauts of Apollo 15, 16, and 17, and a lot of other random astronauts that drifted into our circle, but those officially, I was dubbed the attitude coach for them. And he was like, how did you do that? How did you get in with NASA? Sales infiltration. I was running Holiday Magic Cosmetics. Our version of the Avon girl was the Holiday Girl. We had a Holiday Girl named Jeannie Harrington, and she was no better or worse than anybody else. Lovely Southern lady, but she just sold cosmetics, and she wasn't a superstar. But one day at a training session, I heard her say that her husband worked at NASA. And so, cut the story a little shorter, it turned out her husband was the launch test supervisor of the manned space program at NASA. That made him a top dog. If you've ever been to the Space Center down there, there's a huge pyramid built on the grounds covered with names. And that's where the heroes of NASA's names are. James Harrington, is on that pyramid. So, being interested in the space program, I grew up watching the old Vanguard rockets rise up about 3 feet off the pad and fall over on their side on television, black and white, in the early 60s, late 50s, whenever it was. And just had a fascination with it. My dad was an amateur pilot, so he was fascinated, and we sort of got into it. Now I'm talking to a lady who was married to the launch test supervisor of the manned space program, and she works for me. How difficult could that be? So I just chatted with her for a little while and put her on my list of if she called. She got put right through by Marty, my secretary, executive assistant, boss, and we became close buddies. And then one day, as Apollo 14 was about to be launched, she asked if I'd like to come down, stay with them, and watch the launch. And I said, absolutely. And she said, we may have some people over for dinner who would like to meet you and so on. I said, fine, love to. Well, the people that might want to meet me were the astronauts of Apollo 15, 16, 17. And the reason they wanted to meet me was Jim and Jeannie had built me up to them. But besides that, they knew that being an astronaut had an expiration date. There was a day when you were not an astronaut anymore.
Right.
And although most of these were Air Force people, even that has an expiration date. So they're looking down the road. What do I do next? They wanted financial advice, career advice, and so on. And it was sitting around in the Harrington's living room that Jim Irwin, who was the first guy to drive the lunar rover, the moon buggy, around on the moon, much faster than NASA had asked him to drive it and trained him to drive it. He turned it into a race car. He asked me, he said, would you be willing to serve as our, let's call it attitude coach? And I said, I would be honored. And I'm thinking, well, it's worked again. Sales infiltration starts with a holiday girl selling cosmetics for a big cosmetic company. And 4 conversations later, you're sitting in a living room surrounded by astronauts who want you to be their attitude coach. That's sales infiltration. I don't mean to be mercenary or whatever, but I knew what I was up to from day one.
Well, of course you did. I mean, you weren't just chatting just to chat. You had an end goal.
Right. Absolutely. With you, and you and I have laughed about this, when we first made contact, and I found out you were the queen of podcasting with a podcast in the top, was it 1.5% of all the
Globally. Yeah.
on Earth. I said to myself, maybe you ought to get up close and personal with this lady. So
we were already friends, so tell the truth. You'd already been on my show. We were very comfortable with each other, and I was very clear that in many ways you were my mentor. But this kind of came out of the blue, and I almost knew what you were doing when you did it because you targeted me on LinkedIn because you knew I was a chump and I was going to go pick me because you were like, oh yeah, I'd really like to work with somebody and maybe be a co-host. And you were just so humble about it. I knew what you were doing at some level, but I still, had my hand up in the air. Pick me, pick me, pick me. So you did. It was embarrassing. And I've read the book. So.
Well, for our listeners, what she's referring to is
sales infiltration.
Sales infiltration. What I said basically was, here's what I'm looking for, Denise. I don't have the time or talent to build a podcast from the ground up. So what I'm looking for is somebody who already knows what they're doing, and maybe I can help them along the way, be a co-host or whatever, and sort of slip in the back door. And Denise said, in so many words, pick me. That's sales infiltration. First, we became friends because people buy from people they know, like, trust, and with whom they feel safe. And so then I just laid out my desire, and she said, well, let's do it together. And I reached down at the list I had in front of me and went, check.
Dang it.
Got that one.
I got, I'm not going to say I got screwed, but boy, I got snowed big time. It's one of the best things that ever happened to me. I love these, every Wednesday chatting with you.
Yeah, and keep in mind, listeners, this is not manipulation or anything evil. I had something to offer Denise. She had something to offer me. It was important we brought it up and talked about it. With NASA, I had something to offer them. It had nothing to do with rocketry, and most of them were test pilots. Back in those days, you were a pilot first, an astronaut second. Now you can be a doctor, first, or an accountant if they need an accountant in space, and they'll teach you how to sit in a rocket. You don't need any flying skill, although some of them still have it. But the, you get in with them mentally, psychologically, as a buddy, as a friend. And then once that's accomplished, and you can do it in a sales call or while trying to be the attitude coach for NASA, either one, you get in and become their friend. And to me, it's just a joyful game. We go out, Gigi and I went out to have a late lunch, go to the post office and something else, I forget. And at the end of the trip, as we're coming back home, Gigi said, "Do you have any idea how many people you didn't know that you now know in this little 2 or 3 hour period?" And I said, "No." She said, "I was paying attention today. You talked to 15 people you'd never seen before in your life. You patted a dog, you complimented the kids, you kidded with the post office people and got the people in line involved." And I said, I almost can't help myself. I love it. I love to infiltrate. When I go in the post office, if I'm in town and I like to take in the light stuff if I can. When I walk in, there's always people in line, but I don't have to get in line. I go where you put packages down, and that's at the beginning. But when I walk in, people look up, smile, and elbow each other. It's he's here. Listen to what he says, because I invariably will make fun of one of the workers there that's become a friend of mine. I get better service than other people get. They see me and run to the back if I've got a package and get it without being asked, etc. That's sales infiltration. And it's not insincere. I love people, but I had to train myself that it's okay to say hello to a complete stranger and start kidding with them. Gigi will often say, if I said that to somebody, they'd hit me. I said, well, you got to work on your skill, your talent. You know, it's
And be able to run if you need to.
yeah. I've never had a problem. There were some people a little slow on the uptake. You have to sort of pause and smile, and then they go, "Oh, you were kidding." But one of my opening lines, let's say there's 15 to 20 people in line. I'm at the nearest end when I walk in. I mean, open the door, bang, that's where I put the packages. And at the far end is a gentleman who's become a dear friend of mine, David. And as I said, dear friend of mine, I don't know David's last name. I've talked to him almost every day for 25 years, and we're such good friends. It would seem a little stupid now to say, "Oh, good friend, what's your last name?"
Yeah,
He's
don't do that.
yeah, he's Latino or something. Uh, he looks like a Spanish movie star, but that because he's way down there, it gives me the opportunity to speak loud. So before he's even aware I'm there, I say, "I'm fine, David. Thank you for asking." And he will say, "I don't care how you are," or something like that. But the whole line, people tend to go to the post office at the same time every day. The whole line is waiting for the comedy routine. A lady came out one day and we were leaving together, and I held the door for her. And she said, "He really likes you." And I said, "He doesn't act like it." She said, "No, he wouldn't kid with you if he didn't like you." Well, I knew that, but she was trying to comfort me because he had just said he didn't care how I was. So we've sucked in another 15 or 20 people in the afternoon at the post office who are in on the game and look forward to it. And I walked in the other day, was a person behind the counter I'd never seen before, and David said, "Good news, Ben, you've got a new victim to play with." And he introduced me to a new guy named Seth, a redheaded guy. And so Seth and I now have a routine. He'll take my package and you say, "Because of the way you treat me, we're not going to deliver this." And I said, "Fine, that's what you always do."
Yeah,
And
this is nothing new. Tell me
yeah,
something else.
his new
It's
thing
the
is he
United
says,
States Post Office. We know.
his new thing is he takes the package from the one I have in my hand. He'll take it from me and say, "Let me just put this right in the trash for you." And the people in the line now know Seth is in on the game. And so it's like a traveling vaudeville show, but it's all sales infiltration. Those with little kids will look at me and wave, and I say, give me 5. And they've been told not to talk to strangers. Almost every time the mother or father will say, no, it's okay with him. You can go see him. And they'll run over and I pick them up and so on. And I'm thinking, remember this, remember how that relationship developed. This is sales infiltration. Become their, I told you, Jimmy Rucker, my running buddy, business partner, greatest salesperson I ever personally worked with. When we'd meet new families, the little kids would be calling me Mr. Gay, and they'd be calling him Uncle Jimmy. In the first 10 or 15 minutes, I thought, I got to learn that. How do you become Uncle Jimmy and I'm still Mr. Gay? At first, I sort of liked it because, well, I'm the boss of the two of us. And then it sort of offended me. How come I'm not the member of the family like they are? And I started changing my ways. San Quentin, I worked there for 5 years. And I say I worked there every Friday night at 6 o'clock, 5 o'clock, till 5 or 6 o'clock the next morning. We held an encounter class, what became a whole industry. Later, it was taken from San Quentin and my People Builders program there. Well, if you're sitting on the outside of San Quentin, and it was within sight of my home in Marin County, the smokestack was right across an inlet in San Francisco Bay. And I'm thinking, that would be interesting to add to my resume. I'm already doing seminars. I'm semi-retired. And I think I'd like to do that. So I got to thinking, who do I know that knows somebody? Well, there was a guy named Margot Margosian. He was head of the Marvelous Marin Breakfast Club. He was a mover and shaker in the community. Everybody in San Rafael, Tiburon, Marin County knew Margot Margosian, and we had become buddies. So I called him. I said, I got an idea. I think I'd like to teach a seminar over at San Quentin, but I don't know how to get in. The way you get in is you rob a bank or murder somebody, but I want to be able to also leave at the end. And he said, does it have a name? And I said, People Builders. Just made it up on the spot, because if you go into prison, you want to build people up so they get out and stay out. I said, People Builders. He said, okay, let me make some phone calls. It was either late that afternoon or the next day who called me, and he said, I've got you set up with Red Nelson. He's the warden. You just call the secretary, set a time, and you're in. That's called sales infiltration. I infiltrated Margot Margosian where he trusted me to the point he was willing to put his reputation on the line and get me into San Quentin. Punchline there is I gave him a beautiful presentation, and Red Nelson said, we're going to do it. Fill out these papers. His secretary gave me a stack of papers. I'm exaggerating, but it seemed like a foot tall. It was at least 5 inches of paper. And he said, I'm going to push this through. And I said, what does push it through mean? And I forget what I was going to charge him, probably $20,000 a year back in those days. This is a long time ago. And I said, so how long is it going to take? He said, I'm going to push it through 2 years max. I'll get it approved in 2 years. I said, what if I did it for free? He said, we could start this afternoon. He said, deal? And I said, deal. He
So
picked
who
up his microphone.
infiltrated you?
Yeah,
That seemed like
he
it's kind of
did.
mutual.
But here was my ulterior motive. I wasn't after the $20,000 or whatever it was for 1 day a week. I was after putting that on my resume. This is years later. I probably walked out of San Quentin for the last time over 40 years ago. And here we are talking about today, and people are still fascinated by it. That's where I met and sat in the cell with Charlie Manson. and some people far worse than Charlie Manson. He just was the most famous of them. But that got me in, got me doing, we did the first seminar that day with the people who heard his announcement. If you're interested in self-improvement, we have an expert here report to the Jewish chapel. That's where we held our meetings for all those 5 years. I walked in, there were 200 or 300 people sitting there out of morbid curiosity, and some they just wanted to get in out of the yard. But we began to turn them. When I got to San Quentin, the recidivism rate was 65%. That means 65% of all the people that were let out were back for some other crime or parole violation in 2 years, within 2 years. After we had 2 years of records to run on, if you went through and graduated from people builders, our recidivism rate is less than 5%. So it had a tremendous impact and enabled us to, and made me a lot of money, because most nights or many nights when I went in, I would bring a guest with me, and everybody I brought was pre-approved. Bring a guest in with me and let them see me in action and get up and say a few little things, because they all wanted to say they stared death in the eye working with these parolees, soon-to-be parolees, these convicts, inmates, etc. Well, what most of the people didn't know, wasn't a secret, I just didn't talk about it, was almost every guest I brought in was a potential client outside the walls. Well, if they got in and saw me at work at San Quentin and saw the admiration that the inmates and convicts and staff gave me, selling them was nothing. So I'd pick up.
You've never told me that before, but that makes absolute sense.
Sure. It gave them a story to tell. And I probably picked up, it had to have been one a month, serious client, probably 2 a month, and sometimes more than that in an evening. And when I introduced me back at their home office, they'd say, let me tell you about the guy. You know him as a salesman. You know him as the closers. You know him as this and that. But I'm telling you, I know him as a guy who faces 300 inmates for 12 hours without any food, water, or anything else, and makes them say yes, sir, and no, sir, and turns their lives around. So giving up a day a week at San Quentin was one of the most clever things I ever did. Margot Magosian, that was sales infiltration. Red Nelson, the warden, that became sales infiltration. And everybody I ever brought in as a guest was a result of sales infiltration. And they went back to their companies and did the selling for me. I didn't have to make presentations to boards, directors, or whatever. If they'd been through the San Quentin experience, I was in. Same thing at Lompoc and with many of the other things that I've done. We have credit. I read in a book the other day that I was credited with starting the large group awareness industry. I didn't know there was a large group awareness industry, but that was from my seminars, not at San Quentin, although they had the same techniques. It was from Leadership Dynamics Institute and Mind Dynamics Institute. Leadership Dynamics produced many, many of the top people in sales and marketing, personal development around the world. It was an encounter, a 4-day encounter. We started Thursday morning and went to Sunday afternoon, no breaks. You'd go to the bathroom. There was a bathroom in the meeting room. And you ate K rations out of a little can I found in an Army surplus store. Successful. We had a couple of billionaires come through. Many millionaires would put up with, when they realized that we were doing good, would put up with 4 solid days. Somebody asked me if I'd ever start LDI again, and I said I couldn't. I can't last 4 days now. I was doing this in my 30s. But that was all sales infiltration, and some of the top people in sales marketing today came from it, and we recruited them into it, other top sales marketing, personal development people, because of what we were doing. It was all sales infiltration. I didn't go out and make sales presentations. I just said, here's what we're doing. Here's my track record if you want to come join us. come join us. And it was not an insignificant amount of money. I think it was $2,500, which would be about $25,000 today, to be abused for 4 days. And then, as I said, it had a lot of spinoffs in Mind Dynamics, which was a spinoff of the Jose Mind Institute, or whatever, Silva Mind Institute. We produced many people, including one of our top instructors was Werner Erhard of EST and the Forum and so on. We trained him in mind dynamics to do what he was doing. And if he's listening to this, he's in Europe now and not in good health, I've heard. But if he ever hears this, Werner, you were sales infiltrated. You think you were just working a job. We were moving you along by the rules of sales infiltration. It's
And
just
I was
okay.
writing down while you were talking because, and these are things I probably haven't thought about before, but you're going into so much in-depth conversation here that I'm thinking a little bit different. And I thought I knew all about sales infiltration, but what I'm thinking that you have always done, it was just natural to you, is that you're always peering around corners. You see patterns and you look at them, you exploit them. Does that sound about right?
Yeah,
Okay.
exploit might have a negative term, but that's exactly what I do.
Right.
Exactly. I was born. Most of what I've done, I was trained by, Earl Nightingale and Larry Wilson, Bill Goebel, Og Mandino, all those people. Um, the technical skills. But one thing I was born with, it's a gift, is I have the ability to, I picked up the phrase later, but I thought, it's me, to see things from 30,000 feet. I can see, I'm not good at details, but I can see the overall picture quickly and zoom in on the specific thing that needs to be fixed or done or improved or what have you. But none of that will work without sales infiltration. And one of the joyful things, many things in selling are, I'm sneaking around doing this. I hope they don't catch me doing that,
No, 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 you don't
etc.
do that. That's
No,
not at all what it's about.
yeah, but the way I practice sales infiltration, you can talk about it openly. You know, I've said to people, they said, you have a unique approach to presenting your product or whatever. I said, yeah, it's called sales infiltration. You see, people buy from people they know, like, trust, and with whom they feel safe. I want you to be that person. And go, oh, okay. You can be open about, here's what I'm up to. When I came in here, I was the salesperson and your defenses were up. I want to get you to put down your defenses, figure out what's the problem we're looking at, what's the solution to it, and work together for our mutual good. Fair enough. Fair enough. Now, I just explained sales infiltration to them while I'm doing it to them. Actually, while I'm doing it for
With
them.
them and with them. Yeah, it's with
Yeah.
and for and two. That's a little bit brutal. I don't think that's at all what you did it to me. Let's just get that out of the way. You did it to me on LinkedIn. But I figured out fairly quickly what you're doing, and I was laughing my fanny off, going, "Okay, pick me, pick me. Okay, you pick me. Now I
I
own."
won. I won.
And then I think I told you, "Now I own you, man," and you went, "Yeah, right," or something like that. It has worked out so beautifully, but I did recognize what you were doing, and I was pretty impressed by it.
Yeah, well, it maybe didn't have a name to you yet,
It
but if
did. I'd
you,
read the book. I had
yeah,
read the book, and I'd had conversations with you already. It was just it happened so quickly. My you know, frontal cortex wasn't really catching up. So eventually I went, "He snookered me. Good guy." Yeah, that was smart.
to your benefit. That's the trick. I've had people say, "Well, you suckered me into that." I said, "Are you better off or worse off?"
Yeah.
Better off. Yeah, well,
Yeah, there you
good.
go. Yeah.
Aren't you glad I suckered you into that?
Yeah, and I have to ask you, when you were putting that out on LinkedIn, I'll never forget it. Did you have anybody else in mind, or was I your goal?
You were my goal. I
I
haven't
figured.
talked to anybody else about it before or since.
Well, I am impressed with myself. If I could, I'd pat myself on the shoulder.
If I talked to somebody else before, I wouldn't have been able to talk to you about it because I had gotten them.
Right.
You see
Okay,
what I
well,
mean?
yeah, I do.
Yeah. So,
Well, I'm
if you think about it,
impressed.
you were first because
Yeah,
you won.
I did. And I
As
thought it
we
was the pick me. I thought I won by doing that. So, oh, well,
you
we
see what
learn
we're
and we
doing
live.
now?
Yeah.
We're laughing about a sales situation, which we can talk about openly because it was done with the best of intentions where everybody benefits. San Quentin went from the worst place in the California prison system to people now fighting to get into it because it's where all the training and teaching is. And there are people there today holding classes, training classes, and so on, who probably have never heard my name. But it all started with people builders 40, 50 years ago. Now they have a journalism school. You can learn how to be a television host, producer, director there. And people are fighting to get in so they can learn specific tools to get out and work. Well, back in my day, we weren't doing specific tools, we were changing attitudes. But in the process, we changed the attitudes of a lot of inmates and we changed the attitude of the staff. All of the staff members that I cared anything about went through people builders. And the difference was the only thing unique about it was they had to really go through it. Come in, take off your lieutenant bars, sit down, and you're Terry. You're not Lieutenant Terry Wooster. You're Terry. And you don't have any authority over anybody. Now if a riot broke out, he could revert to being Lieutenant Wooster, I guess. But and Lieutenant Wooster, Terry, his wife went through it. His kids, including a girl, went through it. It was not in the beginning. It was just for the inmates. But when they saw what good was being done, they got real loosey goosey, and I was able to invite or bring anybody I wanted. I met Charlie Manson because he wanted to come to the class, and of course was told he couldn't. He was in the adjustment center, fresh off a death row, so I had to go meet him. But the original attitude of the staff was Charlie Manson wants to meet you. You know, I said, well, send him. He didn't say Charlie Manson. They said an inmate. And I said, well, anybody can come. Send him over. Well, this one is a little different. I said, what's different about him? He's Charlie Manson. I said, oh, okay. So they let him loose on the yard before I ever met him. He sued them to get released into the general population. Means you're out in the yard with, if they were all out there at one time, they never are, but if they were, you'd be out on the yard with 3,200 convicted criminals. And he wanted to be among them. He didn't want to be locked in the adjustment center after he got off death row. So something happened, and I guess they lost their argument. So they let him loose in the general population. He'd been there one day when a guy came up to him, squirted him with lighter fluid, and his accomplice lit him. They set Charlie Manson on fire. By the time I met him, he had scars. You could sort of tell where it was. I'd read about it anyway. So that was the reason that. So I said, I wish you could come to class. Charlie said to me, "Oh no, thank you very much." He
He
he'd had
had
it.
to have known that he was going to be a target. He had to have known.
Well, yeah, and or he believed his press clippings. He thought maybe he
Oh,
was a tough guy, and
maybe
you
he
know,
could start a new cult or something.
yeah. But he was a little bitty guy. He always reminded me of Sammy Davis Jr. If you remember his size, he was that type of guy. He was not physically intimidating at all. When I was locked in his cell, the correctional officer said, "Are you okay uh, with him?" I said, "Sure." And he walked away. They didn't stand there and guard me. They knew me and they knew the run of the prison that I was allowed, but they wanted do you understand I'm about to lock you in the cell with a person that is considered to be a mass murderer. He wasn't. He didn't murder anybody that we know of. He was just the group leader. And since we're coming to the end, I probably mentioned this before, but when I walked into his cell, he had a 2-bunk cell and although he was a guy by himself, the rest of the adjustment center had two bunk cells, and they had 2 people in every one of them, unless it was a temporary vacancy. But nobody wanted to go to sleep in a cell with Charlie Manson. I
No,
wouldn't have wanted.
that
I
would
didn't
be a
fear him.
massive lawsuit waiting to happen.
Yeah, I wouldn't. I didn't fear him awake, but I wouldn't have gone to sleep in the cell either
Good point.
with him. So anyway, he used the top bunk as sort of a storage area. He had a couple of shirts up there and an extra pair of pants or whatever. And it was his library. And in the library, he had 1 book. He didn't have the Gideon Bible, which they give to everybody. I mean, I don't think I've ever met anybody in prison didn't have a Gideon Bible with an arm's length. So if they gave it to him, he gave it away or threw it in the trash or something. He had 1 book, How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. And I said to him, Charlie, well, whatever I call him, I think, yeah, I always call him Charlie, I think. I said, Charlie, what an interesting book selection. Is that your only book? He said, oh, yeah. He said, it's my Bible. I couldn't have built the Manson family without it. Now, there's an example of you can use a gun to stick up a bank or defend your family. Good, bad. You can use How to Win Friends and Influence People to win friends and influence people. For evil, the technique is the same, or for good, which is the way Carnegie wrote the book. He decided to use it for evil, but admitted that he couldn't have built the Manson family without it. And thinking about How to Win Friends and Influence People, if you haven't read it, listeners, get a hold of it. It's life-changing. Written many years ago, it's life-changing. And for those of you who are students of my work, you'll find a lot of sales infiltration sprinkled throughout it, not called sales infiltration, but the technique is the same. And with
After you
that, we're
told me
within
that,
2 minutes of the end.
oh, I know. I wanted to tell you, when you first told me that story a year or 2 or 3 ago, it's been a while. I remember and this is, I think, an English term, but I was just gobsmacked. I was like, what? And I have the book. I hadn't read it in a while, and I grabbed it and I sat down with it. And I tried to see it from his perspective, but I'm not a murderous sociopath, so I couldn't do it. But I remember thinking, you have got to be kidding me. But that just tells us that words are important, very important. So be careful.
Well, I think we're at a very fertile session, and as always, I appreciate the opportunity, and I'm so glad you won the job of having me on your show.
Me too. Thank you. And I say that with all sincerity. I just love you to death. Well, listen, everybody, we talk a lot about the closers. They're important. If today's conversation with Ben got you fired up about sales infiltration, you need the closers part 2, but you really need both parts, closers 1 and 2. And these books have been called sales Bibles for a reason, a solid reason. Generations of top producers have built their careers on what's inside these pages. And you can find them on eBay. Just go to Ronzoni Books, RONZONE Books, and shipping is free. And they're shipped, I think, the next day, aren't they, Ben?
Same day if they're in before 2 o'clock.
Okay, so you'll get them very quickly. So don't just listen to Ben and I talk, and don't just listen to his wisdom. Go make these books part of your entrepreneurial library and follow us along as we are chatting, and we chat about a lot of stuff. So thank you for spending your time with us today, and we will see you next week, and we'll pick up where we left off on this particular 4 topics. So thank you, Ben.
Thank you. You have a wonderful day and continue to heal.
I'm doing my level best. But, I have to tell you, I did find out that if you curse a lot and loudly, it's a pain relief of sorts.
Yeah, I can see where it is. That's how
Yeah.
come Gigi is never in pain.
I'm telling her you said that. Okay. We'll see you next week, everybody.